Well, that video is pretty good to build a little empathy, isn't it? My name is Jason Haig. I'm the associate pastor at Christ Center Church. Thank you guys so much for being with us. When we were putting this event together, we wanted to not just explain the model that we have built at Christ Center, but we wanted to bring someone who could do just what that video does, bring some empathy in explaining how our children with special needs, how they process and how they see the world and why it's so important to reach out to them. And we're very fortunate to have a man like Corey Jackson in our community. And we're especially happy because he attends Christ Center, which makes it all the cooler. But Corey is a real gift to the body of Christ. He is a licensed professional counselor. He is a neurofeedback clinician, an OPAC Facilitator at Christians as Family Advocates. He's very, very smart. And Corey has some wonderful things to share, so I'm going to invite him up now. Corey Jackson, everybody.
Thank you so much. Boy, it is, wow, this does my heart a lot of good to see all of you out there tonight. I have been working in the field of mental health with kids since right around 2004, but also came out to Eugene as a church planner way back. So I've kind of had my feet in both worlds for a long time, the kind of the ministry world, but also the world of community mental health and working with kids. So to see the church curious and ready to answer this call and maybe taking some steps in the direction to making this community a safer and more welcoming place to the kids in our community does a lot of good to my heart. So thank you for being here. This is really special. So what I want to do is really just kind of go through some of what's going on the inside for kids with special needs. And as I'm introducing this, I want to introduce this term to you. This is this term, sanctuary trauma. This was coined by Sandra Bloom and some others who worked at a clinic working with Vietnam veterans way back. And they realized as they were doing this work with people who have experienced trauma and had really difficult lives. They went off to Vietnam War and it was really tough. A lot of trauma, a lot of hardship. Came back. Life was tough. Home was hard. So they would reach out and they would say, maybe I do need to reach out and get some help. And they would reach out to a clinic. And during that time, the clinics didn't really understand the special needs of people with post-traumatic stress. And the clinics were fairly harsh places themselves. Very sterile, very cold. The staff was overworked. They didn't get the needs of the people that were coming in. And what would happen was a lot of times these veterans, they would finally reach out for help only to find the sanctuary that they were reaching for, one more trauma. So they coined the term sanctuary trauma to kind of get that idea that, it's a very very hard thing for a person in a tough situation to reach out for help. And when those people reach out for help, and the help is maybe it's not an evil thing or a mean thing, but it's an uninformed way to try to deliver help, accidentally re-traumatizes, that can leave a person feeling very, very helpless and very, very alone. So I'm so glad to see a lot of us coming together and saying, hey, let's figure this out. Let's get some ideas of what's really going on inside there so that maybe we can deliver care and deliver the good news and let the sanctuary become a true place of sanctuary for people who truly need it, right? And who we're talking about tonight are kids with special needs, and I'm going to throw their families in there with that as well. And for a lot of reasons, faith communities can be challenging for kids with special needs and their families. So we're going to look at why that is, and there we go. So first we're going to look at who these kids are, what's going on inside the mind, inside the brain, inside the body, kind of a clinical response. So some of my clinical work as a mental health worker will come into this, but also I'm going to throw in there a faith-informed answer to truly caring for the kiddos in our community. So I'm going to start up with who. First of all, when we say special needs, that's a really big category. I'm going to include in there things like kids with mental health diagnoses, the anxiety, the depression, the OCDs, those sorts of things, which there are quite a few of. We're also going to throw in developmental disabilities as well, which autism is a part of, and trauma. Kids who have experienced abuse, have experienced neglect. Because all of those things, there is a response that happens within the body, within the mind, the experience of a child that has those things going on. So first of all, I want to let you know just kind of some of the prevalence here. So these come from the Center for Disease Control statistics. It says 1 in 6 children ages 2 to 8 has a mental health, behavioral, or developmental disorder. And another study mentions that 1 in 59, so we'll break down the developmental disorders even more specifically, and these numbers are saying 1 in 59 is on the autism spectrum at some point. And a lot of people say that number is even higher. And my experience is even in our community, that number is quite a bit higher. This breaks down even further. So this is just looking at depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders by age. And you'll notice kind of the prevalence. And you see how this increases as kids get older. So think about this in terms of like the kids that you work with. Are you a kind of preschool ministry sort of person, or kind of elementary school, middle school, and high school? You'll notice, look at that with the anxiety disorders. You see that jump from the younger ones up to our elementary, then the high school. The kids I work with who are in those age groups have a lot of anxiety. I have kids that come in and just sob and talk about how difficult just life in general is. And boy, those kids are kids who need a place of sanctuary. The behavioral disorders, so you middle school pastors and elementary folks will see that this kind of fits with that. The behavior disorders go up a little bit and then taper down a little bit through the high school age. Here's another important number here. So more than 2/3 of the children, of all children, have experienced at least one form of trauma in their life. 2/3. So that's, if it's not you, it's 2 of the other people around you right now. And this comes from the ACEs study. That's one of the biggest landmark studies that's been done documenting what's going on in our communities right now. So what those traumas are things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. And it goes into neglect, physical neglect, meaning you don't have your basic needs taken care of, or emotional neglect, being uncared for, unloved, not being shown the compassion that you need. Also, household dysfunction falls under this study, so having a parent with mental illness, a relative who's incarcerated, domestic violence in the home, substance abuse, and divorce all happening. So when they did this study, they basically started doing questionnaires and saying, how many of these things have you experienced? And however many of those you have experienced is called your ACE score. So adverse childhood experiences is what that stands for. So again, 2/3 of people have at least one of these. 2/3 of the people walking around. Now, this has a huge impact on mental health, but also on physical health, on addiction, on life expectancy. So what they found is if you have 6 or more of these experiences, it tapers your lifespan down by like 20 years. It takes about 20 years off of life. When a child has experienced these sorts of traumas, these are the kinds of things that you might see. So in preschool children, things like fear of being separated from the parent or caregiver. They cry or they scream a lot, may eat poorly or lose weight or have nightmares. Our elementary school kids have symptoms like being anxious or fearful, having guilt or shame, a hard time concentrating, they don't focus very well, they have difficulty sleeping. Middle and high school age children feel depressed or alone. A lot of eating disorders, self-harm, a lot of the cutting behaviors, alcohol and drug use or experimentation, and becoming involved in risky sexual behaviors. So those are the kinds of things, and it's easy to look at those and say, wow, those are just kind of like bad behaviors that you see in kids, until you peel it back and say, wow, what's the origin here? And that there's things going on for these kids. So when we're talking about the who, here's little graphs here that say this is what our community looks like. These are our kids in our community. That 2 out of 3 are walking around with trauma. 1 in 6 is walking around with a mental health disorder or a developmental delay. So that's the kids. But you also got to factor in there, all of those kids have people who care about them, who have families as well. So it's the children of our community, but it's also the families. It's the household. So for every kid who's having a hard time, there's a parent who loves and cherishes that kid. That's their treasure. That's their heart that they're walking around with. So that's the who. Now we're going to look at the what is going on inside there. And this is where I think things get really fun, because I love the neuroscience involved in this. And honestly, all of those things, whether it's a developmental disorder or a behavioral disorder, a mental health diagnosis or trauma, all of those things filter through the brain, the body, and the nervous system. There's a neurobiological component to all of these things, to the stress that a person might experience who has one of these things going on for them. So the interpersonal neurobiology of these disorders is what I'm going to talk about. That's a lot of words, right? So interpersonal neurobiology just means we've got a brain, we've got a body, we've got a nervous system, and that impacts us when we interact with other people. Some things start to happen. When things are really good, certain things happen in our brain, in our body, in our nervous system. When things are hard, things happen as well. So I'm going to kind of walk you through here the brain, give you a little bit of a breakdown of kind of a simple analogy of what might be happening and what the structures are within the brain to kind of filter all of our relational interactions with other people. So like when someone walks into your church, what might be going on in their brain? So the first part of the brain that I'm going to mention is our most important in terms of, it's the most highly active, the most sophisticated part of our brains. And and we're talking to faith people here, so I can just say this is like the most well-designed part of our entire body. This thing is unbelievable. The amount of information it can take in and process. This upper part of our brain, the executive state, this is our prefrontal cortex, right? Our frontal lobe, where our language lives, and logic, problem solving, all the things that make us unique as human beings live up there in the frontal lobe, or what we'll call the thinking brain, or the executive state. But that's not all we have. Down below that is the limbic system. This is the seat of emotion. This is what's called like the feeling brain. So if our upstairs or that green brain is the thinking brain, down below that is our feeling brain. Our feeling brain is where our attachment lives, our connection, our love, our emotions, our passions. All of those things live down in that downstairs or blue brain, the feeling state of our brain, our limbic system. And here's the deal. Our limbic system is really active in children because our brains develop from down to up. Our upstairs brain doesn't fully develop until we're like our mid-20s or even later sometimes. So for our kiddos, their downstairs brain, their feeling brain, is kind of driving the ship. There's a lot of activity that goes on down there. So if you've recognized that little ones have really, really big feelings, there is a biological answer for that, an explanation for that. However, this feeling part of our brain is very vulnerable to insult. This is the part that when we're interacting with other people and we get that little ping of like, what do you mean by that? That's our downstairs brain kind of paying attention to what's going on. Now, it can also say, wow, I feel really loved by this person. I feel this person gets me. That's that limbic system that's saying something about what's going on out there. What it wants to know most, the limbic system, the feeling brain wants to know that you're known, that you're understood, that you're respected, and that you're loved. Now, our basement part of our brain, the most primitive part of our brain is our survival state. This is the brain stem. This is what keeps you alive. So if you're here tonight and you're breathing and your heart is beating, you can thank your brain stem for that, because that's what its job is to do. However, this is a part that's super active when you feel like your life is being threatened. Now I say feel, because it doesn't mean that your life really is being threatened. If your interpretation is that this feels like life and death, your brainstem is going to be the one that's active. So when things are going well, all of these parts are working together. They're playing well together. They're talking to each other. Our thinking brain is important to figure things out, to learn new things, to speak to each other and have conversations and communication. Our feeling brain is really, really important. Our emotions inform us about things that are going on all around us all the time. Is this person safe? Is this not? Can I trust this person? Can I not? Am I feeling good about this place or am I not? That part of the brain is important. Our brainstem is incredibly, incredibly important as well. I'm going to give you a little model of this that you can take home with you. This is the hand model of the brain that Dr. Dan Siegel uses. And so if you can make a little fist around your thumb, you've got all three parts here. So up here, this is your thinking brain. This is your frontal lobe. Under here, wrapped beneath that, is your feeling brain. That's your limbic system down here. Your wrist would be your brain stem. Now, under optimal circumstances, we're all good. They're all kind of hugging each other, and they're letting each other know, it's like, hey, is this safe? Yeah, it's okay. We're good. When there's too much stress that goes on, we do what Dan Siegel calls flipping our lid, right? We lose our thinking brain. And I'll get back to that in just a second. Because the bad news is that triggering environments are a great recipe for flipping our lids, for losing touch with our thinking brain. When we do that, what are we left with? With our feelings, with our survival state. So when stress of any kind, like the video that you just watched, think about kids walking through life where it feels like the world is screaming at them. I'm so glad that there were the fluorescent lights on that. I had a kiddo that I worked with one time that he told me, when I'm in a classroom, it feels like the lights are screaming at me. I was like, oh my gosh, I can see why you don't do so well on your math work now. If someone was screaming at me all the time, I don't think I would do very well on my work either. And it feels like that sometimes, the stress of the situation. We lose our clear thinking, and we're left with our lower levels of thinking. So the triggers kind of inhibit that upstairs thinking. It also releases a few neurotransmitters and hormones. One of those, the stress hormone, is called cortisol. When we are under stress, our bodies are flooded with cortisol. Now, cortisol is actually a good thing. It helps you get through stressful moments when you need to. It's kind of like God knew that sometimes life was going to be hard, and that he gave us this great little substance in our brain to kind of get through those tough moments. When it's in the right context, it's great. It helps you get through. When you are constantly stressed, cortisol is actually toxic to your body systems. It causes all sorts of health problems. It's not good for you long term. So cortisol, boom, you got to flip the lid, you get through that tough moment, your cortisol goes back down. It actually takes about 8 hours for cortisol to completely leave your body, though. So you've got stress hormone going through your body. So if you've had a rough morning or a meltdown early in the day, sometimes that cortisol kind of follows you a little bit and life gets a little difficult. Cortisol actually inhibits the formation of new memories as well, so you don't learn very well when you've got a lot of cortisol going through your body. You don't think very clearly. So eventually, if you're under stress for long periods of the time, the brain eventually just turns off the faucet, says no more cortisol, you're done, because this stuff is killing you, which leaves you with no cortisol, lower than average levels of cortisol. So when you come to that next stressful situation and you need that cortisol, it's not there in people who are under stress, under constant stress, day by day by day. So thinking about kids with special needs, living under stressful situations day by day by day, can you see why some meltdowns might happen, even just neurochemically? They don't have the good stuff to get them through some of those things. So it's like, hey, this isn't that hard, right? Can't you just do this like the rest of the kids are doing? Sometimes their brain's not even ready for it. Now, another neurochemical is norepinephrine. So this is kind of that excitatory chemical, gets you kind of pumped up, and also the adrenaline. If it's like feeling kind of life and death, again, feeling, if you perceive that it's life and death, you may get a burst of adrenaline running through your system as well, which again, if a child's trapped in a car and you need a burst of adrenaline to rip the door off, you've heard about these things happening, it's fantastic, but your body can't handle it long term. So you get this kind of cocktail of neurotransmitters happening when you're under stress constantly. Your brain it's like it's go time. It's ready for fight or flight. You're left with your feeling state, and all it's saying is, help me feel loved. Help me feel known. When a child's under stress, that is the first thing that they need to know, is that you get them. You understand, I get you, kid. This is tough. This is a hard thing. When the limbic system feels felt and known and understood, it starts to release a neurotransmitter called GABA. And GABA's whole job is to calm down those excitatory parts of the brain. But the feeling state wants to feel known, wants to feel loved, but you're also, some kiddos, they're past the blue brain, they're past the feeling brain, they're down in the survival state. And when they're down in that survival state, all they want to know, all they can understand is, am I safe, am I not safe? That's what their brain is begging for. Please help me feel safe, help me feel known. I'll talk a little bit real quickly about the insula here. So the insula's job is to measure the feeling between me and you. It's this tiny little part of our brain that is just fascinating. And they're doing a lot of research on this now and realizing that this is a really powerful part of human interaction, this insula in our brain. And what it does is it measures what's going on in that other person. It can perceive fear and rejection without you speaking a single word. That's why awareness is so important. You getting and understanding what may be going on in the world of the child is so very important. Because if you don't know, if you don't have any context, and it looks like a kid's just freaking out or crazy or bad, you're going to treat them as if they're freaking out, crazy, or bad. And their insula is picking up on that. Immediately, you don't have to say a word. And they're already picking up on that. And this is the part that's truly heartbreaking here. So, social rejection. The insula measures this, and they've actually done some studies in functional MRIs on the insula when it is perceiving social rejection. The insula perceiving social rejection is the same, lights up the same in a functional MRI as if a person was being stabbed, if a person was being physically assaulted. So our social interactions carry a lot of weight to them. So without understanding that cocktail of neurotransmitters and that flipped lid and that survival state of the brain and that emotional state of the brain, a lot of times to the uninformed looks just like bad behavior, right? And children with special needs are more vulnerable to the flipped lid, to that cocktail of neurotransmitters, because life is overstimulating. Life is stressful. It's hostile and it can feel unsafe. So there's a clinical response I'm going to go to with this. So you kind of get a little bit of the idea of what's happening in the body, that it's amped up, it's ready to go. So some great clinicians have given a lot of people who work with kids permission to care, permission to connect, permission to interpret these behaviors in a different way. We've got context now. So folks like Becky Bailey, who works with she's developed the conscious discipline model, and she's got this great paradigm where we can look at behaviors as either disruptions and disturbances. We can interpret them that way, or we can interpret them as communication. If we interpret them as a disturbance, it's go time. We are automatically us versus them. This kid is disrupting my space, my house, my world, and I'm ready to, this is a conflict. We got a power struggle. If you can look at it in a different way in terms of this is a communication, then you are working with the child. Their behavior might be saying things like, I'm scared and I need safety, or there's just too much going on around me, I need less stimulation, or I feel really sad and I'm not sure I can do a whole lot right now, or I'm missing some skills, I need some help, or I'm just not sure that I trust grown-ups yet. Grown-ups have been around when a lot of bad stuff has happened. Who are you to say you're different than any of these other people here? Their behavior might be communicating that something has happened and they're still building trust. I also really follow a guy and trained under a guy named Ross Green under his model, the collaborative problem solving or collaborative and proactive solutions model. And his main idea of looking at all behavior with kids, especially kids with special needs, is that kids do well if they can. Most kids prefer doing well to not. And if they've got the skills to be able to do well, most kids will. But for a lot of kids, there's some very good reasons why some skills might be missing. And we've got an opportunity to interact with those kids and say, wow, I get what's going on here. This kid's missing some skills. And I can treat them with empathy. I can look at the world through their eyes. You being here tonight shows you care about empathy. You want to see what's going on in the world of the child. Reassurance. You can reassure the child, this may be a different situation here. Connection. I'm connected with you. And we're going to collaborate. We're going to work together to fix what's going on here. Now, Dr. Bruce Perry is probably about the world's foremost expert in the world of trauma, human trauma right now, specifically with kids. He's got a paradigm that I love also. And he talks about compassion with the child and really changing how you think, going from the paradigm of what's wrong with you. A lot of times it's easy to go there. Kids acting a little squirrely and we say, what's wrong with this kid? He suggests a different way. He says instead, try, what happened to you? What happened in your world? Is this a complex neurobiological situation going on? Is there a developmental delay? Has there been trauma? Are you dealing with a mental health issue? What happened to you? You see how softer that is? How much softer, how much more compassionate that is? And the thing is that connection is actually healing. So kids perceiving adults who are understanding and at ease, without even using words. This begins a different biochemical process. Here's the good news. We had the bad news first. Here's the good stuff. So when you meet that need for safety, I see you, I understand, I'm here for you, I cherish you exactly as you are. Or meeting that need for felt safety, you're safe here. There's no threat. I'm here to help. We start something different happening in kids. And honestly, our kids who are triggered a lot, their brains are hot on that downstairs level. They flip their lids really easily. Their brainstem is very, very hot and have very little connection between feeling brain and thinking brain. But every time you walk a child through and let them know that you're safe and you're here for them and you're going to help them walk through this, you're literally building neural pathways between the downstairs and the upstairs brain. You're connecting those. You're rewiring the brain to expect safety rather than expecting pain. Now, Becky Bailey has this phrase that she uses called joy juice. This is kind of cool. So when these things happen, we soothe the downstairs brain. and we get a new chemical cocktail going on. We get some oxytocin. This is the attachment hormone. And this is specifically when you give someone kind eyes. So think about kiddos coming into your classroom and giving them kind eyes, or letting them know that you're there to, maybe they don't like eye contact at all. So maybe it's you not giving them eyes at all. Knowing what the child needs demonstrates, I care about you. They get a burst of oxytocin that says, do this again. You can connect with this person. It's the brain chemically wiring you to do this again. This is the hormone that's actually released when mothers are breastfeeding to increase attachment between mother and baby. You get this by giving a child kind eyes. They get that burst of oxytocin. They also get a burst of dopamine, that feel-good chemical that I just had a really great bar of dark chocolate chemical, or got a really good shopper's high. That's dopamine in the brain also. You get that from positive human interaction. You also get endorphins just by kind eyes. You get natural painkillers. So human interaction wires us biochemically to be free from pain, to connect more to other people, and to feel good. That's good news to me, guys. And that insula starts to do some different things too. When you understand a person and they feel understood, they perceive confidence, assurance, peace, and calm. And your calm is contagious to the child. Your calm is contagious when you can look at a child who's maybe having a meltdown, having a difficult situation, and you get them, and you don't feel so scared and so freaked out. They connect to that in a biochemical and in a brain sort of way. And it starts this process called co-regulation, where their brainstem will kind of follow what's going on in yours. And if yours is calm, theirs is more likely to calm down as well. Because we used to think that, you just get bigger, stronger, louder, and that's what'll control a kid and make them do what you want them to do. And what we're finding is it's actually the opposite. If a kid is melting down, you being calm, softer, in control, confident, peaceful, actually helps their brain and their body start that process. So here's some good news for kids who really need it. So I'm going to quote Dr. Bruce Perry here in one of his videos. He says, and again, this is Dr. Bruce Perry. This isn't the gospel. This isn't the Bible. This is the world's foremost expert on trauma. He says it's as if we are neurobiologically designed for relationship. How's that hit you? Our brains are designed, this is the world's expert on trauma says, our brains are designed for connection and for relationship. And compassionate interactions are healing and nurturing to the brain. In Dr. Perry's clinic, they've actually done brain scans and shown kids who've experienced trauma, it impacts the brain on an organic level. It looks different. There's not as much connection between thinking brain and feeling brain. And then they do those brain scans again when kids have had time to form positive connections with trusted adults, and the brain scans change. The brain is physically healed by positive connection with trusted adults. So it's almost as if, I might be a little bold here and say, man, it may be neurobiologically accurate that perfect love drives out fear. Right? That's Dr. Perry. That's not me. Perfect love physically drives out that fear reaction in our brains. And this has been kind of my core verse working with kids, both secularly and not. This is kind of our New Testament mandate. And the Bible doesn't say a whole lot, really. A few verses here and there about parenting, about what we're to do. But this one to me feels very black and white. And I love how it says it here in the message. Fathers, and I'll just say parents, adults, can we go with that? Don't exasperate your children by coming down hard on them. Take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the master. So this is good news and instructions beyond just the stonings and the rods that we have in certain parts. This is a mandate that we are not to exasperate our children. And systems that demand change by forcing compliance or ignore the sensory environment, especially for kids with special needs, is exasperating. Did you feel exasperated watching the video? Or do you feel exasperated doing those things? Think about a kid that this is their world, day in, day out, dealing with these things. And we say, just fit in my box, kid. Just do things the way that the other kids are doing. That's exasperating. It's demanding something that they don't have the skill to do. When our mandate says something different than that. And when we do that, we're putting those kids, those exasperation puts them in that emotional and that survival state. However, a little bit of awareness, a little bit of context. Peel back what's really going on, some understanding and compassion for kids with special needs. This promotes connection, restoring, and healing. We get kind of a whole brain experience that their survival matters. It matters that they feel safe. Their emotions matter. It matters that they feel known, and they feel loved, and they feel connected. And then when that happens, they connect with their upstairs brain, and they can actually learn new things, and they can learn the things that they're there to learn about. So again, don't exasperate, but take them by the hand and lead them. That's our job. Not exasperate. Lead them in the ways of the Master. They need our help. So we get permission, I feel like, from this verse to look at behaviors as communication, right? When they are exasperated, that's letting us know something's missing here. We can look for lagging skills. We have permission to look for those lagging skills or missing skills. We have permission to teach, guide, and instruct with gentleness, compassion, and awareness. And when that happens, that's when the really good stuff happens. So I'm going to come back to the sanctuary trauma. There's another book that Dr. Bloom wrote called Restoring Sanctuary. And in this, she's really looking at systems that actually heal. When people come into systems, whatever they are, and actually get better, she broke it down into what it takes to actually, the systems that work, where people are actually doing well, 40% of it was just people having a desire for things to get better, right? Less than half. 30% of people doing well, of getting better and healing, has to do with providing a warm, caring, and non-judgmental environment. We can do that, right? We're kind of best at that. And another 15% is just instilling hope in another person. And it's only a small fraction, 15%, that's actually providing an explanation of how to get better. So you see that most of this, 45% to 85%, is really just connecting with people who need it, right? Providing that safe, non-judgmental, warm environment for people who need it the most. And I feel like that gives us the freedom as church people, as faith communities, to do what we do best, right? We're freed up to do things like provide a warm, nurturing, safe environment for other people, help people feel hope, help people feel connection. And as much as I'm talking about the kiddos, I also want you to think about their parents, because their parents have most of the time borne the brunt of that sanctuary trauma. They're the ones reaching out for help. And when their children are rejected, that's social rejection. Think about that. That's like that being stabbed, right? Only it's not just them being stabbed. It may even feel like their kid being stabbed, right? Which is even worse. And the opposite is true too. When you cherish a child, you have won a friend for life. Their insula says, I can trust these people, I can be in this space, and maybe this is going to be that sanctuary that I've looked for all my kids' life. So it's just awareness, grace, mercy, love, compassion, kindness, empathy. Those sound like faith community kind of words, right? A little bit of awareness put into action provides that sanctuary. So I'm going to leave you with this quote from Dr. Bruce Perry. He says that the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from trauma and thrive. And here's the kicker. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. It's not a huge amount of psychological insight. It's not being really, really smart or having lots of degrees. The most healing therapy is love. Thank you for being here. We're going to take about a 5-minute break, and we'll be back with a lot more. So thanks a lot, and we'll Thanks for being here.